passive talent or it's active talent.
That's a soft skill that really gets undersold in the hiring process.
How to manage in the virtual environment.
You get a diverse cultured group of people. It's a win-win for everybody.
More conversion from candidate leads.
What does that look like in this new virtual world?
Welcome to Talent Experience Live. It's that time again, right? Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. I'm super excited to be here. This is, as I like to say, the greatest show on the internet. I feel like if I just keep saying that you'll all believe it, right? So this is the absolute best programming that you can watch on the entire internet. That's pretty impressive. So thank you so much for being here. This is your weekly look at the latest and hottest topics in HR, interviews with leaders in the industry, and a look at what's new in HR tech, one of my personal favorites. So my name is Tom Tate. I'll be your host today, and Talent Experience Live is proudly brought to you by the team at Phenom. And with our unified talent experience platform, we help candidates find the right fit faster. We help employees evolve in their current role and beyond. We help recruiters achieve some of that next level productivity and efficiency. And we help managers build better teams with data, analytics, and automation. All of this is powered by super slick artificial intelligence and machine learning. We have an awesome event coming up on December 9th, and that is Phenom AI Day. So if you want to check out ai.phenom.com, you'll get all the details. Definitely sign up. Our purpose here at Phenom is to help 1 billion people find the right job. That is not a typo. It is a true billion. We are well on our way. We can't do it without our amazing customers and the amazing support from our community. So thank you so much for being here today and enjoying this program with us. I'm all by myself in the virtual studio today. I'm here in my basement office. Normally we have our producer, Justin Devitt, who's behind the scenes, pulling the levers, helping out. But he is taking some much deserved time off. So Justin Devitt, we salute you. We hope you enjoy your vacation. So you might see my hands reaching for my mouse and keyboard as I try to navigate today's episode. But we have a great one. So what I want to do is see who's here with us today. If you're watching us live on LinkedIn or Facebook, let us know in the comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know what you do. We can use this time to network. Maybe you've got some skills. Maybe you've got some contacts that might help somebody else out. So let's get chatting in the comments. Good opportunity to meet some people. As I mentioned, we're live on LinkedIn. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. So feel free to view on the channel of your choice, whatever you enjoy. And be sure to like and subscribe. Definitely let us know that you're watching. And if you subscribe, that's really awesome because you'll get notified of our future broadcasts. We're here every Thursday, and we might even have a little trick up our sleeves next Thursday, which happens to be Thanksgiving. So before we get into today's episode, we always like to kick things off with a quick icebreaker. And with Thanksgiving in the United States just around the corner and the leaves changing, lots of signs of fall out there. I know my wife got her first pumpkin spice latte over the weekend. Really enjoyed that. Which she's grateful for. So today I want to know in the comments, what are you most thankful for? Let me know in the comments what you're most thankful for. Quick icebreaker before we get started. For me, I'll go first. It's my amazing family. So I was just telling our guest for today's episode, I was traveling last week to celebrate my sister's wedding. And it was just so awesome after a few tumultuous years to really have my brother and my 4 sisters together. We had our parents, the whole deal, to celebrate her wedding, and it was awesome. So that is what I'm most thankful for. And let's see who's here today. We have Jen tuning in from Ambler, Pennsylvania, Sarah from Media. We have Maria. Welcome, Maria, from Florida. Chime in. Let us know in the comments what you're most thankful for. So I mentioned that the leaves are changing, and along with the leaves, the times are changing as well, right? Great Bob Dylan quote. The times, they are changing, and it's coming. It's coming for companies everywhere. We know that. We see that. The problem, change is really, really hard. It's really hard, both at the organizational level and at the employee level. And we're going to explore that on this episode. We'll find some really interesting ways to introduce, facilitate, and embrace meaningful change, both as leaders and as employees. We have a couple people chiming in the chat. So Jen, I sense a little theme here. Thankful for the family. Maria, Also thankful for the family. We have Sarah here as well, thankful for friends and family, my health, and all the simple things in life. I love that. I love that. Thank you, Sarah, for chiming in. So I see a little theme there for sure. So as we start to begin to talk about change, we're continuing, of course, on this show to explore and understand the Great Resignation. Right? It's the big buzzword, the big quit. So many different names attributed to it. There's so many articles being written. So many experts are weighing in, and clearly, we're still talking about this. There is a disconnect that still exists between the expectations and the values of employees and the expectations and values of the companies that they work for. We're seeing this disconnect, and it's really driving employees to look at options outside of where they currently are. So organizations everywhere, they're trying to understand this, and they're trying to understand what changes do they need to make? What changes do they need to make and solidify in order to keep employees engaged and retained, attract those new employees, but also manage the interests of the business itself. And I think it's a tightrope, that they have to walk. It's a really interesting line, and it's not easy. And all of this is happening while employees and managers need to navigate these new waters, right? So we believe the change wave is coming, and we're really excited to have our guest, Natalie McKnight, who is the executive director of customer success here at Phenom. And she's going to be talking through this with us. And hopefully, we'll be diving into some better approaches to managing change and change management. So without any further ado, let's bring Natalie onto the show. Hey, Natalie, how are you today?
Good, Tom. How are you?
Welcome back to Talent Experience Live.
Thank you.
For anybody who is the first time tuning into the show, you were the co-host of this show in its early days. So how does it feel? How does it feel to be back?
Feels great. I got ready this morning because I knew I was going to be on camera. So yeah, and it's been really good to be back.
Yeah, I love it. And we are excited to have you back. So for the purpose of this conversation, I think it's really interesting to throw around the word change management. It's kind of a stuffy word, I think, maybe an old school word. How do we want to define change management so we can have a really solid conversation about it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I feel like it's coming in current events. It's becoming more and more of a stuffy word, right? People are like, oh gosh, change management, here we go. It's like the corporate buzzword. And I really feel like for our purposes, it's about organizations' ability to adapt to their employees' needs. And I think that you can generalize that across the board, right? So for me and my role here at Phenom and my team's role at Phenom, change management is always a big piece of what we try to cover with our customers because we're implementing software, right? So to get somebody to use something new you're going to be met with initial resistance, right? Because people don't really like change. That's just how we are as humans. We're wired that way. But at the bigger sense, it's any kind of change, right? We've all been working from our basements, our bedrooms, our living rooms, closets, wherever we can, for the last 2.5 years or 1.5 years. And that's all going to change because now we have to figure out how to adapt to that as organizations and figure out what our employees actually really want and need and how we meet those needs as employers.
Yeah, and we'll get into that today. I think 2020 was the year that no one expected. And we spent the greater part of that year really just reacting, right? And I think 2021 was hopefully going to be the year that we found enough stability to stop reacting and start implementing some actual change. But what we saw, I think, was there was too many waves of uncertainty that came. Like things started to open back up, and then with the Delta variant, at least here in the United States, things started to slow down a little bit. So we're still experiencing all those different challenges. So I don't think anyone's in a position to say we've reached a state where we can implement change with a lot of certainty, right? But going into 2022, I think there's an expectation that we're ready. We're ready to enter into this change wave of being able to say, like, this is how we're going back to the office with more certainty. This is how we're going to be working and collaborating together with more certainty. And uh, it's going to hit a lot of employees in a very specific way. You know, some are ready for that change and some are like, I kind of like it in my basement. You know, like, I'm not ready for that. You know, this has been really helpful. The flexibility has been great. So we're going to be met with equal parts resistance and equal parts acceptance. So, you know, this conversation that we're going to have today, who needs to hear this? Like, who is this conversation for?
I think it's for everybody. I mean, it's
Sure.
definitely, it's for employees, right? It's what is what I'm feeling in line with what everybody else is feeling, right? Because I feel like in addition to all of that change and you know, your change in preferences, we're also like a little bit more isolated, right? We don't have somebody to turn to our left or right to be like, oh man, I hate it when this happens or whatever it is. So a lot of those thoughts, I think it's helpful to feel validated by that. So as an employee saying, you know, I really do like the option of staying home or being able to go into the office, that then becomes a bigger conversation around overall what do employees need. But I also feel like, you know, the obvious answer to your question is the employers as well. It's a lot of as a business, what do we need to do to ensure that we're giving our employees what they need to feel like they're getting their needs met, right? So I think it goes across that spectrum as far as, you know, what this conversation or who this conversation entails.
Yeah. And we jumped right into it, right? We didn't even have a chance to step back and say, hey, Natalie, who are you and what do you do at Phenom? So I think that you've had a very unique role here at Phenom, which has allowed you to experience change management firsthand at some of the biggest organizations globally, right? So why don't you give us just a quick pitch of, you know, what's your role at Phenom and how have you stumbled into change management as a discipline just in doing what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I head up the customer success team. My team works with our largest global organizations who are headquartered in the US. And customer success, for anybody tuning in who's like, what the heck is that? Really, how we define customer success here at Phenom is the ability to drive adoption and value realization of our product. So the spiel that I used to give to all of my customers when I was managing a book of business was always, you know, I'm here to make sure that you're using the product, but I don't feel like my job is done until you feel like you can't get through your day without Phenom. So there's a really big difference there, right? It's not just I'm logging in to check off a box throughout my day to say that I did. It's more I'm waking up in the morning, getting my coffee, sitting at my desk, and the first thing I do is log into Phenom because I know I have leads. I know I have you know, candidates I need to follow up with, and I'm going to do all of that. I'm going to live in that system in the CRM. So that's kind of customer success, and you can imagine, you know, especially in our industry, for HR professionals, talent acquisition professionals, there's a way that things have kind of always been done, and Phenom kind of came in and the technology is there. And I think leaders across the board recognize that this level of technology and the solution that we're able to provide is revolutionary. And it's something that is vastly needed across the organization to make sure that we're filling roles quickly, that we're getting the right talent in the door, we're helping those billion people find the right job. But when you get to the user level, it's like, well, wait a minute. I come in every day, I do this thing, I log in, it's working for me. Why do I need Phenom? So that's really where the change management piece comes in, where organizations have to be very cognizant of how is this disrupting our users every day? And how do we get them to see the value before they even use it and then start up that path? And then in addition to that, I mean, managing a team and being a leader at this organization, I feel like has also really opened my eyes to change management in a different way, because now there are times when I have to do the same thing with my team and my employees and say, you know, hey, here's a new thing we need you to do, and here's why we need you to do it. And there's an art form associated with that for sure.
Yeah, even positive change is a disruption, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's something to consider too. And you have to manage disruptions gracefully. I like that you said there's an art form to it, because I think that that's true. Like, I really think you have to understand the dance that you have to do, whether it's positive or negative, not negative, but challenging, and I think that I think you mentioned earlier that children, I have children on the mind, right? I think you mentioned earlier that humans are creatures of habit, and I think that we just have to remember that, and you have a really great graphic that you've shared with me. Do you mind if I put that on the screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you could walk us through this, I think that'd be really helpful, because I like the way that it maps out a lot of the feelings that we have.
Yes.
Right. Let me share. Okay. Let's see if that pops up.
Yeah. There
Cool.
it
So
is.
this is what you call the change experience. I'm sure you've seen this graphic, this slide many times. So why don't you walk us through what does this mean?
Yeah, so this is pulled from, change theory. And it's actually, if you look at it, it's the 5 stages of grief, essentially, right? I mean, that is the change experience summarized. And we show this to customers as they go through, as they go through implementation. This is one of the first things we show them, is like, hey, listen, this is the trajectory you should expect. And I think anytime you implement change on any level, personally or professionally, you're going through this process, right? Your initial expectations are really high. You're super excited. Even like if we use like a hybrid work model as an example, right? We're changing up the office. We're making it so that it's more collaborative, and it's optional to come in, and oh my gosh, it's going to be so great. It's going to be different and awesome. And then the shock of effort comes in, right? So it's like, what furniture do we need? How much do we need? What expectations do we have to manage? There might be a little bit of bargaining. So then employees might be coming in and saying, well, wait a minute, I've been coming in every day because I've been vaccinated or whatever it is. I don't want to go to a hybrid model. Or, you've got people who are fully remote who say, I don't think I ever want to come back. So having to deal with that and all of that frustration, but then you start to see that light at the end of the tunnel as you iterate on the change you're trying to implement, right? It's not going to go perfectly. You're always going to have that you're always going to be met with a certain level of resistance. And I think that's the big not catalyst, but fork in the road for a lot of organizations. As they come and they're met with that resistance and frustration, you can either try to plow through it, or you can look at what you're doing and say, what do we need to adjust to make sure that we're compromising completely and really making this, whatever it is, work for everybody. And that's when you really start to see that improvement and what you want to see. And that's the better than before that gets there. But you got to get through that valley before you see that bigger peak.
Yeah, and it does look like a wave. You have your crest and you kind of have your trough. And I think that, looking at this, and I kind of want to start to guide the conversation a little bit into talking about how we can help leaders specifically. So we'll talk a little bit about how we react to change as employees, but as a leader, if you're consuming this graphic for the first time, right, and you're starting to understand, okay, this makes sense. Like this makes sense to me, right? Like these different stages and kind of the peaks and valleys. As a leader who's kind of taking this all in, how do we support a vast, diversity of employees who are probably going to hit these peaks and valleys at different times, express that in different ways? So I'm just kind of curious if you have any thoughts on, how do you manage this? This isn't one size fits all, so how do you manage this when you're engaging with them, in your case, with teams, but as a leader with your own teams, your employees?
Yeah, I think it's really being, like, the first word that came to mind was like being the rock, but it's not really the rock, right? It's just you as a leader, I think, have to take in a lot of what people are giving you. So it might be feedback, it might be frustration, it might be, that bargaining or whatever it is. And you almost have to like let that filter through you and tease out exactly what is like the important things that you're hearing from each of your employees. So, like you said, it's different stages for everyone. So while one person might be totally fine until they get into that new environment and start doing things differently and then give feedback, someone else might be like, before the change even happens, they're like, no, I don't want this. And then other people, it might be not until later where they're like, well, hey, wait a minute, I've been doing this for a while now, and here's the feedback that I have. So I think it's really, really important as a leader to listen and to be open to the feedback that you're getting so that you can then iterate. Because I think the other part of all of this and just change in general is that there is no finish line. And I think if you're trying to create a finish line or strive towards one, you're never fully going to embrace change because it's cyclical, and there's always something different that you can be trying to improve and drive results.
Yeah. It almost feels like a masterclass in empathy, right? Because you have to be, to your point about being the rock. Like, I think, what I'm hearing is you have to be present at all times, taking it all in, right? And being able to respond accordingly. And like, that does require great empathy and understanding, that you will have those people. In your example of going back to the office or going to a hybrid model, you're going to have different people from different scenarios who are going to just respond so totally differently. And you have to not have a stance. Like you need to not worry about how you feel about it. You need to be able to listen, take all that in, digest it, and be able to show empathy to whomever it is that you're speaking with. And it almost also feels like you need to have already been to the other side. You need to have already seen the light at the end of the tunnel and the better future so that you can represent that. You're kind of like the lighthouse, it's far off in the distance, but you can see it. And you need to be able to show that for your teams and your employees. And it's certainly not easy, so I think like we need buy-in with change management. And I think leaders need to be bought in first. You need to be the first to buy in, because if you're not bought in, your employees and your teams never will be either. Have you seen that? Have you seen exercises in getting leadership bought in, as like the absolute number one priority? When you walk into the scenario of let's say software, what's your first step typically? Is it leadership buy-in, or is it something different?
Yeah, it's typically leadership buy-in, right? Because we find that the more invested the leader is in the implementation, the better it goes across the board, and the more likely that we are able to drive adoption later down the road. So one of the first things that we do is that slide was actually a part of a presentation that we do with our customers. And the other thing that we talk a lot about is we can't do this without you, right? Especially in a vendor customer relationship, if I just walk in and I do this like every time, but I'm like, hey, I'm Natalie from Phenom and I really want you to use our product, that holds so much less weight than the employer and the leader coming in and saying, I'm holding you guys accountable to this because I believe in it. And I believe that this is how we're going to see success. And I believe that this is how we're going to transform the way that we hire people. That holds so much more weight than someone from the outside coming in and trying to say, hey, this is really valuable. And I think that also segues into the importance of finding your early adopters or early buy-in from other people who aren't leaders as well. So, again, to get out of the software analogy and go back into, returning to work or whatever that is, just those people that are already excited about it and want to be a part of it early on. Find those people and let them kind of help evangelize whatever that change is across the organization. And it's equally just as important to find those detractors, right? Those disruptors, the people that are really resistant, because you want to make them a part of that process early on and make sure that they feel heard and actually listen to them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But make sure that they feel heard so that you're not consistently met with resistance from those folks throughout the process, right? So I think it's really important at the very beginning of any change process to say, Do we have leadership buy-in? Do they understand that they have to kind of help drive accountability? And then who are the people that we're really going to be working with early on, those disruptors and those early adopters who can help us drive change as we go through? Because again, peer-to-peer is so valuable, right? So to be able to turn and say, well, I've been using this product and it's been so awesome, like you should too, or hey, it's been really great going back to the office once a week. I get so much more done than your boss saying, you have to do this thing or we're going to have a talk, right? Like there's got to be a mix of all of that.
Yeah. And there's, I'm going to flash my screen up one more time. There's this great article from Forbes that we were circulating, we were passing around about change management specifically, why change management doesn't work. Millions are still leaving the workforce, and should you? And kind of a facetious title here. We know that change management does work, right? But I think this is really jabbing at change management in the traditional sense. But one of the things that resonated with me around this article, connected to what you just said, which is so many people are leaving their organizations or not responding to change management because they're not connecting with the purpose, right? There's no purpose that is kind of the unifying strain that is keeping all the employees united and also driving them in that, the trough, like taking them out of the valley and into the promised land, right? And I think that purpose does it. And like you said, like it can't just be, we're using this brand new tool because we invested so much money into it, or we're going back to the office because, so-and-so said we had to. Like, that's not purpose, so like you have to find that unifying purpose. And when we're describing your champions, your internal champions, if you talk to any one of them, like they would explain or articulate purpose. They wouldn't just say, or they would explain or articulate value, right? They wouldn't just say, I'm doing it because I don't want to get in trouble, right? Champions don't become champions just because they don't want to get in trouble, right? They've landed on something. So I definitely think that, this article touches on that a ton, which is pretty awesome. And I think it definitely makes sense, right? And we have to find that as leaders and unify our teams based on that purpose. And you hit all those points. So one thing that I think is interesting when we're talking about kind of organizational changes at the top level, I feel like there's probably a lot of companies who are having their 2022 planning meetings right now, and they're all getting in, conference rooms or virtual conference rooms, and they're talking about all the things that they need to do or all the aspirations. I feel like the biggest trap is they're trying to do one size fits all solutions, right? So what are your thoughts on kind of tailoring change based on different departments or different groups within an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's number one is listen to your employees. What's happening? What feedback do they have? What has their experience been, and what are they looking for in the future? I know everybody has feelings about employee surveys, but I mean, it's a great way to collect data at this point to say, listen, when we look to the future as an organization, what are you looking for? What is important to you? And I think, that Forbes article talks on it a lot. Flexibility is huge. It's massive in this new world. And people now expect a level of flexibility. So I think, if you're seeing that as a trend in the feedback that you're getting at your organization, it's really time to look at, okay, if they really want flexibility and they're not getting it, how do we then offer that to them? I think if you're trying to drive change without really listening to the people it's going to affect, you're just going to get stuck in a cycle of change that you don't want, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You want to make sure that anything that you're doing sticks. And again, it goes back to the purpose and, really finding what is it that our people want and need, and how do we give that to them in a way that feels good, right?
Yeah.
If you have to meet halfway or whatever it is.
Yeah, and you mentioned that a bit with bargaining, and kind of that phase, right? And I'm curious too, do you feel like change that shocks the system is inherently bad? Like, do you feel like in your experience that's, taking the wade into the waters approach versus just throw people into the deep end? Like, I'm sure there's schools of thought on both, right? And
Yes.
I'm just kind of curious where you stand. Not that one is right or wrong, but I think it is an interesting thing to consider because you mentioned flexibility, and I think to go from having 100% flexibility to 0% flexibility is a shock to the system,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So is it easing into it? Is that the better approach? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, I think 2 years ago, I probably would have been like, no, 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 wade into the water and figure it out. But then 2020 happened, and I mean, we
Yeah,
were all forced
right.
into the situation that we're in now. So I think it probably depends on the organization and the culture, right? Some organizations will have more success just ripping the band-aid off and saying this is our process now. But I think there's a lot of value in imposing gradual change as well, because again, I think it's just making people feel comfortable.
Sure.
So it depends probably on the level of change, the organization type and what you're trying to do, I think will really influence how you approach it.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that. And I think that you're right. Like, it has to be, when change management is all about the needs of the employees, it really needs to consider that, right? And I think that you'll understand, where
Mhm.
they fall on that spectrum, to decide what might be the right approach there. I want to shift the conversation a little bit, right? Because not all of us are leaders in the traditional sense. I feel like the majority of people watching, they were not in those full leadership team conversations that have been happening in those conference rooms across the world. Many of us are employees, right? We're on the front lines, and we are embracing or needing to embrace this change as it comes at us. Oftentimes in waves, sometimes gradually. And that can be really difficult, as employees who are managing so many other things. We're still actively navigating pandemic life, which has eased up or, accelerated depending upon where you live. So some might go along with new change just to be a team player. I've seen that before. It's just, I'm going to do whatever is asked of me because I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And whether I agree or disagree with it, I'll keep it to myself. Maybe that is or isn't the right approach, but I'm curious, as employees, like, what is the best way in your opinion, to really adopt change in the appropriate way, especially if
Yeah.
it's change we don't agree with. And we talked about leaders asking for feedback. Just, should it be the flip side? Employees should just be very liberal with their feedback.
I mean, if you're being asked for feedback, I would say then my recommendation would be to give it,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
There's anonymous surveys that come out. They're anonymous for a reason. And, the only way that you can drive meaningful change is if you're influencing what that change is. So I'm always a very big proponent of giving feedback when it's asked. If it's not being asked, there's two different things. I mean, you definitely don't want to go out on a limb to give it, but also I think that as an employee, that should drive the question, do you want to work for an organization that's not asking for feedback, that's not really taking that into consideration?
Yeah.
Or it just might be a different avenue or channel that they're asking, and you have to follow that. But I think it's really important, and this is another thing that article touches on, is really thinking about, as an individual, what do you want? What is it that you're looking for, and what are you not even passionate about doing, but just like, how are you going to get the most fulfillment out of your life? I think that's one of the biggest question in like the Great Resignation that's come out is, what am I doing? And what does it all mean? And how is it going to affect me long term and my family or my friends or, my life in general? So I think really asking yourself those questions and asking yourself, what is it that you want? And deciding whether or not, is this right for me or is it not? And just having that honest conversation with yourself first before anything else, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, totally. And I think that it speaks to something we talked about earlier, which is purpose, right? And I think you have your individual purpose that we're all trying to be in pursuit of, right? And understanding what is the meaning of my day today. But then it's also the meaningful purpose of your organization and the work, right? And I think that if you're not connected to that, and your organization is making no effort to connect you to it, right? And the changes that they're implementing aren't grounded in any of that meaning or purpose. Is it time to look? Is it time to look elsewhere? Like, I would say yes. I would say, hey, like if you've reached that brick wall where you've been open, you've been providing feedback, you've been having these conversations with your manager, but the way that change is being facilitated at the organization, you're just not feeling connected. To me, that's time. Like, that's the time to begin looking. And I'm curious if
Yeah, and I think it's not good or bad, right?
Right.
Like, we don't want to. I don't think it's, there's like bad guys in this situation. I think it's just organizations are going to have to make decisions that align with their goals. And if you determine as an individual that those goals no longer align with what you need, yeah, it's time to look. But I also think there's a certain level of reflection that's needed around being honest with yourself about what you need,
Sure.
right? And giving that organization, if you've put, all this time and effort into building your role, give the organization time to figure it out too, I think is fair. If we've given them plenty of time, of course, yes, but this is a lot, and every organization is also going through this exact same thing. So I think that's another thing to take into consideration is, your goals might not align any longer with your current employer, but you may be met with that same situation in other organizations too. So just really being considerate about all of that and understanding that, we're all in that same boat as organizations and trying to figure this out.
That's a great point, because so often people run away from a situation, not really understanding what they're running towards, and they'll run towards a situation that they think, optics wise looks better. And then once they get there, they realize, hey, same problems, same situation. And then they're back at square one, so, and I think we'll see that with the Great Resignation. I think we'll see a lot of people left in pursuit of things that they thought were actual, only to find out later that, many of the same problems and challenges exist everywhere. With organizations. And I've also read a lot of articles about boomerang employees, right? And how we're going to see a wave of employees come back to the organizations that they left. So we'll see, right? It's all up in the open. But a lot of great things to think about, a lot of great topics to pursue in future episodes as well. So definitely appreciate that. Are there any final thoughts or any final words you want to kind of cover on this topic? Any words of advice, whether it be for leaders or employees?
I think the only thing is that this is not like a thing that just happens in big chunks all the time. Change is something that happens in small incremental ways as well. So think about, if you're faced with, as an employer or employee, a big change coming up, I mean, I think it is helpful to think about the smaller pieces of change that maybe prepped you for this larger one that's coming. And, seeking out support where you need it. So as an employee, I think making sure that you're being supported by your manager and that you have people to go to. And then as an employer, just making sure that you're checking in with the people that work for you. And being open, transparent, candid wherever you can. I think that's really all people ask for at the end of the day, is just tell me what's going on. And as long as you keep that at the forefront of everything that you're doing, and trying to make things better, the world is your oyster.
Yeah,
as they say.
Yeah, no, I love it. I always think of the analogy of a manager or an organization. It's all about getting the right people on the bus, right? You want to have the right people on the bus. And in 2020, the bus went off the road, right? And since 2020, even in 2021, so many organizations are just trying to get the bus back on the road, right? And I think the best thing that we can do as leaders is, to your point, be transparent and say, this is the road we're trying to get back on. It's not the same road as before. Might be a totally different road. The destination at the end of that road might be completely different. There might not even be a destination, right? Like, it might just be a direction, right? And I think all employees need to know, this is the road, this is the direction, and then they can make a decision if this is the right bus for me, or if I need to go get on another bus. And then it only helps the organization get the right people on that bus. So if you're not meant to be on it, it's a mutual
Yep. No hard
amicable thing.
feelings.
Yeah, no hard
Yeah.
feelings. And then you're just constantly trying to get the right people on the bus and get that bus back on the right road, heading in the right direction. And I think we've left this conversation with a lot of good tools and tactics and ideas. Great framework. Your graphic with the peaks and valleys, I think that's incredibly important. It's an incredibly important tool for any leader and employee to look at that and say, where am I? Where are my people? What do they need? How do we get through this? And just keep moving in the right direction. So, Natalie, I can't thank you enough for joining us on today's episode. This has been great. We will certainly have you back on future episodes. And I hope that you have an awesome week and a great weekend.
Yeah, you too, Tom. Thanks again.
Awesome. Take care, Natalie. Well, there you have it. Another great episode in the books. Thank you for tuning in to the greatest show on the internet, Talent Experience Live. We are live every Thursday at noon on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. So be sure to like and subscribe. I want to thank Monica, Jen, Joel, Sarah. We had Maria join us today. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks for your participation earlier on in the chats. Hopefully that you enjoyed this conversation about change. We're all experiencing it. We're all on the same bus together, trying to get through it, trying to get back on the road. So the best thing that we can do is we can talk about it. We can use the tools that we have at our disposal and keep moving forward. One of the tools that we have at our disposal here at Phenom is artificial intelligence. We leverage artificial intelligence to elevate insights that you really just can't see with the human eye. We're looking at thousands, millions, billions of data points every single second, every single day. And we're synthesizing that and we're using that to our advantage to help organizations find the right fit faster, to help recruiters be more efficient and more effective in their day to day, get that time back so that they can make meaningful relationships with candidates out there. So we have an amazing event coming up. And I just want to run a quick trailer that the amazing Justin Devitt put together. So we're going to run that real fast. And I hope that you can join us for this event because we are super stoked and it is coming up fast.
It's being called the Great Resignation. A record number of Americans are telling their bosses, I quit.
4.3 million people quit in August. That's the highest number of people quitting on record, dating back to more than 20 years. And that's up from 4 million who walked away from jobs in June.
Many businesses are suffering from a major shortage of workers. With the 10.4 million jobs open, employers are scrambling to find help.
And according to analysts, hiring new employees is only half the battle. Companies face a steep penalty if they are unable to retain employees they already have.
A new survey from productivity firm Lattice found that 54% of respondents are looking to change jobs, and 43% say their career paths have stalled or, quote, slowed to a crawl.
There's all kinds of reshuffling and reallocation happening in the economy, and that's going to cause friction and a lot of pain for human resources departments, frankly.
I love it. I love the way that kind of like fades out, you know, a little bit of suspense, a little bit of intrigue. So if you want to find out what the mystery is here, definitely check out ai.phenom.com, December 9th. It's going to be a 2-hour live broadcast, special event. We are super, super excited for this. So check it out. But in the meantime, this has been Talent Experience Live. It has been my pleasure to join Natalie McKnight to talk about a very important topic, change management. If you tuned in late, check out the replay and be sure to like and subscribe so that you can check us out every Thursday, 12 p.m. Eastern. And hopefully we will catch you on the next one.